Hello, podheads, and welcome back to another episode of Over My Dead Pod. I'm your host today, Holly Lamoureux.
Ooh, look at you, girl. This is Kate Carter.
And I'm Kylie Colwell.
Okay, ladies, so let's just jump right in. There are some cases where the moment you hear the timeline, your stomach drops because everything happens in such a small window of time. A few phone calls, a short drive, and then nothing. In this story, a teenage girl disappears from her own home, leaving behind blood, silence, and questions. We're talking about a case where someone knows exactly what happened, but they've managed to stay quiet for more than 30 years. Leigh Occhi was born August 21st, 1979 in Honolulu, Hawaii to Donald Occhi and Vicki Felton. Both of her parents were members of the U.S. Army, and the couple met while serving in California and got married in 1977. But Donald and Vicki divorced in 1981, so they've been divorced for most of Leigh's life. Father Donald relocated to Germany, but he remained in contact with his daughter who visited him there. And I think Donald is stationed in Germany at that time. Leigh stayed with her mother in Tupelo, Mississippi. This was a really safe community. And like almost every other murder we talk about on this podcast, no one in this town feels the need to lock their doors until they do. Leigh is 13 years old, and it is the morning of August 27th, 1992. But today is not a normal day because on this day, Tupelo, Mississippi was expecting Hurricane Andrew to hit any time. The hurricane had already wreaked havoc on a large part of the Gulf Coast, but luckily, by the time that it would get to this part of Mississippi, it would have been downgraded from a Category 5 hurricane all the way down to a tropical storm. That morning, her mother had to leave for work by 8 a.m., but Leigh is staying home alone because she's actually on summer break, so she's out of school. So usually Leigh's mom trusts her to be alone. This was like a normal thing. Leigh's just a very trustworthy, good kid. And Leigh's school actually starts the coming Monday. So later that day, Leigh is supposed to go to her middle school's open house with her grandmother. So Vicki gets to work like normal, but shortly after she arrives, she hears that the storm from Hurricane Andrew is about to hit their area. So she immediately called her daughter shortly before 9 a.m. Leigh was scared of storms, so she needs to check on her, and Leigh did not answer the phone. And apparently Leigh and her mom had this special ring routine, so Leigh would know it's your mom, you need to pick up. So her mom would call and she would let the phone ring a couple times, then she would hang up and immediately call back again. So that was Leigh's signal, it's me calling, answer. But this time Vicki called. She let it ring a couple times, she hangs up, she calls again, and Leigh never picks up. Vicki immediately finds this troubling because Leigh is really good at answering the phone. She always answers and she knows that there's a storm coming. So Vicki immediately leaves work to check on her. So Vicki's work is really close. She's only about 1.5 miles or 2.4 kilometers from her work. So she's pretty close and she arrives home shortly before 9. Vicki drove up to her house and she immediately knew that something was off because her garage door was open and the light was on. Vicki enters the home and the first thing that she sees was there was blood in a pool on the floor and blood splattered on the hallway walls. So now she's running through this house, screaming for Leigh, frantically going from room to room. She runs into Leigh's bedroom, and Leigh's favorite blanket was crumpled on the floor. Vicki calls 911 at approximately 9 a.m. Police arrive immediately, and law enforcement found additional pools of blood in Leigh's upstairs bedroom, and the blood is actually still wet, meaning that this blood spillage happened recently, which lines up with the fact that Vicki left before 8 a.m. and called the police by 9. Police find significant blood smeared in the hallway, the bathroom, and on the bedroom door. They find hair and blood on the door frame, suggesting that Leigh had hit her head there. There was a trail of blood going through the house, from the living room to the back door. There was blood found in the bathroom, and it was kind of watery and pink in color, indicating to law enforcement that the perpetrator attempted to clean the scene. Vicki discovered that multiple items of Leigh's clothing were missing, along with a pair of shoes, some underwear, a sleeping bag, and her reading glasses. In the laundry hamper, detectives found a nightgown covered in blood. The Tupelo police chief stated it looked like the blood had dripped down onto her nightgown. You would think that the injury had to be above the neck. The really strange thing is, the house showed no signs of forced entry. And we usually know what that means. The perp was someone that the victim knew. Here, I don't know if that's the same logic because she's so young. Like maybe she was tricked into opening the door, or, someone just forced their way in after she opened the lock if somebody was knocking. All evidence that was collected was sent off to the Mississippi State Crime Lab. Police somewhat optimistically believe that Leigh may still be alive. Maybe this is just a kidnapping and someone is holding Leigh. There was quite a bit of blood at the home, but not enough that Leigh had to be dead. That is the blood that we could see. We know that there was also cleanup of some kind. Organized searchers started throughout Tupelo. Police knew that the mom left for work at around 7:30ish and then called Leigh at 8:30 and then came back home within the hour and was back to call police by 9 o'clock. So that only gives the killer about a 1 hour time frame or less to grab Leigh and flee. So he or she could not be very far. By the time Vicky was coming back home to check on Leigh, she could have potentially missed the kidnapper by just minutes. But the good thing is, this narrows down the parameters of the search. But on the other hand, a big obstacle for the search team is that we still have Hurricane Andrew, or Tropical Storm Andrew, hitting the state. So the rain makes it nearly impossible for search dogs to track any scent if there was one. So nothing was found. Citizens of the state and the town all pull together to search for Leigh. Donald, Leigh's dad, comes back to Mississippi to help for the search for his daughter. Donald felt that his daughter was, quote, dead the day his ex wife called him and told him that she was missing. He said his theory is that some bastard beat that child to death in that house. Don stated that while searching for his daughter in Tupelo in September 1992, he was told by several locals to, quote, look at her mother. But he said, I was already doing that. I don't know if her mother was involved. Rumors started circulating that Leigh's stepfather, Barney Yarborough, was abusive towards Leigh. But Barney was ruled out by law enforcement after he had a pretty solid alibi and passed a polygraph exam. He was never ruled a person of interest. September 4th, 1992, 8 days after Leigh went missing, a worker at McDonald's in Boonville, Mississippi, told law enforcement that they had seen a girl resembling Leigh in a car at the restaurant drive-thru. Leigh's picture had been posted everywhere at this point. The man with Leigh was black and driving a blue pickup truck. Detectives were able to follow this lead and actually find the child in question, but it was determined to not be Leigh. September 9th, a strange package was mailed to the Occhi home. The package was postmarked to the home address, but it was spelled wrong, and it was addressed to just Yarborough, which is Leigh's stepfather's last name. Inside of this package was Leigh's glasses. After this, the FBI became involved in the search for Leigh. Vicky gets on the record and thanks the sender for sending the family this clue. The FBI performed DNA testing on the stamps on the envelope, but it was determined that the stamps had actually been attached to the envelope with water, so there's no fingerprints, no DNA. So what we're dealing with is someone who is pretty prepared. There was also no ransom letter. The police department was able to trace back to where the package was postmarked, and it was actually postmarked in the town of Boonville, Mississippi, which is not far from Tupelo. But that's all police were able to gather. I assume that there was some way that police were able to determine that these were, in fact, Leigh's glasses and not just one of those sick people trying to trick the family. It was believed that the glasses were mailed to the family as a distraction to detectives. The police chief also believed this. They thought that if it was a kidnapping, you would have expected a ransom letter. Like, what would the point be of sending the glasses with nothing in them if it was just to kind of taunt the family or taunt police? The person obviously knew the family. They knew that the stepdad lived with Leigh, but they didn't know the family enough to even spell the name of their street right. Meanwhile, the blood that was collected at Leigh's house was confirmed by DNA evidence to be her own. As people usually do, they start to speculate and point fingers. One of the people that the public started to point at was Vicky, Leigh's mom herself. People just thought that Vicky seemed too calm in the face of her daughter being hurt and kidnapped out of her own home. They also thought it was strange that Vicky went to work and then called her daughter so shortly after arriving and then automatically rushed home when she didn't pick up the phone the first time. But also keep in mind that the reason she did this, she was saying, was because of the tropical storm and that Leigh was scared. So to me, this just makes sense. One person who seems to agree with these allegations is Donald, the ex-husband and dad. He claims that Vicky actually gave him two different stories. He says that at first Vicky told him that Leigh had run away. He said that Vicky had made it seem like Leigh chose to leave. and that Vicky had left out the part where there was blood found all over the house. Donald said if he would have known that, he would have come down to Tupelo even faster. Donald said, quote, I believe she was murdered either accidentally or intentionally inside of her home. Maybe someone got really mad at her. Maybe knocked her against the door frame into the kitchen and she died from it. And he's saying that because there was hair and blood found on the door frame, which police were speculating meant that she had hit her head in that area. So that's where he's getting that like oddly specific detail. Apparently, Vicky had also told police some conflicting stories. She told police that she called 911 as soon as she arrived back home. So, like, she sees the garage open, she sees the blood, she runs through the house, and she immediately calls. That's the story. But then later, Vicky tells police that she calls her own mother as soon as she got home, then she calls 911. And if that was the case, there would be about 15 to 20 minutes unaccounted for between when Vicky arrived home and when she called the police. So this is kind of a thing I'm a little bit iffy about because I think if Vicky is completely innocent, then her not remembering who she called first is pretty understandable. Like you rush home, you think something's wrong with your child, you see blood, you're like so scared that your child is missing. You're going to get stuff wrong, I would think. So maybe she calls her mom right after she calls police, maybe she calls her mom before, and now she's misremembering. That's my opinion.
As a viewpoint as a mom, I'd be freaking the fuck out.
Mhm.
I'd immediately be calling 911 if I saw any blood at all.
I think I would black out and like who I call. Honestly, I may call the person that I'm most comfortable with that I would call in an emergency situation. Like, might be my mom for a second, to be like, am I crazy? Do I call, I think like maybe the point I'm trying to get at is like, it doesn't matter who you would call first. The fact that you're remembering it differently is not abnormal. Anyways, that's just my opinion. We'll go on. Take that for what you will. But I also have to say, when police start questioning Vicky's honesty, they also have to start questioning her timeline of events. And she's the only source of timeline. So who's to say that Leigh was even alive when Vicky left for work? Well, that would only be Vicky. So there's this web of issues that police start having. Donald claims that Vicky kept Leigh away from him and kept them from talking because she didn't want the dad to get too much information about what was going on with Leigh. I don't know how much weight you want to put into the ex-husband's words about his ex-wife, but that's what he says. Throughout the investigation, Vicky was administered 3 separate polygraph examinations, one with local law enforcement and 2 with the FBI. Independent examiners stated that she showed deception on all of them. By 2017, the police chief stated that Vicky was still considered a person of interest. Quote, you can't eliminate her. There are still too many unanswered questions for Vicky. I don't know if this is usual for someone to go off to work and say, well, I just left Leigh, but I'm going to call and check on her. Why check on her that soon after she left? End quote. I mean, I thought that was because of the tropical storm. I don't know. Unfortunately, according to the Daily Journal, Leigh's school had noticed that she showed up with bruises and black eyes. Leigh told school officials that she had gotten hurt while riding horses. And Leigh was into horses, by the way. So people in the community start talking and they say that Vicky disciplined Leigh hard and that Leigh was scared of her stepdad and did not want to go back home when she was away. Also, it was said that Leigh would get strange borderline abusive punishments, like being locked out of the house for like extended periods of time.
I feel like, but that was the stepdad that did that?
I'm not
Or the mom?
100% sure if which parent it was, but the parents were living together at that time, so I have to assume that it was like a joint like
I also like harsh punishments. I don't want to say military families, but like in that timeline too, like years wise, there's some good ones, there's some bad ones, and I could see where harsher punishments come from like strict parents
yeah.
in that regime.
Also, this is coming from people playing telephone too. Like this is after the
Right.
fact saying like I heard that she was locked out of her house. I heard she came to school with bruises and blah 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 blah. Like it's not actual incident reports that we're talking about here. We're strictly talking about rumors right now. And we know that kids get hurt. Like they get hurt every single day. But this is the full story. So Vicky has never been named an official suspect, nor has she ever been charged with abuse or anything related to Leigh's disappearance. Of course, Vicky denies that she was involved with her daughter's disappearance in any way, but She says that she knows who is responsible. She says that it is a man named Oscar Kearns. Some people call him Mike. Mike lives conveniently only a couple of miles away from Vicky and keeps the horses at the stable where Leigh rides her horse. This guy even teaches Sunday school at the church where Leigh attends. Vicky said that Kearns started acting strange after Leigh disappeared. One of the strange occurrences was that he gave Vicky a picture of Leigh, like he brought a picture of Leigh over to Vicky's house. I don't know if this is a picture that Vicky herself took. We don't know who took the picture, when it was taken, etc. I imagine that there's probably pictures of Leigh all over the town at this point. But I don't know why Mike did this, like what his intentions were, but Vicky points to this as something that she found odd. There were some other things that Vicky thought was off with Mike, but they were honestly things that were just like speculation, like he didn't look at her in the eye anymore, or he had offered to let Leigh ride his horse. But Vicky's theory is that because Leigh kind of knew Mike, he would have been someone that Leigh would have recognized and opened the door for that day. If you remember, there was no forced entry, and Vicky said that Leigh would have never opened the door for a stranger. As people start talking about Mike, they start recalling all the times that he had talked about Leigh. He had speculated with other people that Leigh's body could be buried right there in the church basement, which was actually under construction after Hurricane Andrew, and that Leigh's body could be in this like random barn. And I have to assume this is just a rumor about where the body was because I would hope that police would have checked that out. But aside from Vicky's own suspicion, police do not have any concrete evidence to arrest Mike, but he's now definitely on their radar. And what I find funny about these conversations that people were like, "Oh, he said this. He's saying that the body could be under the, floor in the church." It's like, "Well, yeah, you're talking about it too." Like obviously it's not that weird for him to say that unless he's just like going around saying that, but I don't know. This is all rumor based. So the case grows silent for months. That is until May 1993. Oscar, or Mike Kearns, is arrested and charged for abduction and rape of a 15-year-old girl in Memphis, Tennessee. This happened when Kearns showed up to the home of a 15-year-old girl, a girl who went to his same church, at 7 o'clock a.m. while she was home alone. He knocked on the door and offered to take her to school. He grabbed her and abducted her. He drove her to an isolated field where he assaulted her. Mike pleads guilty to rape and kidnapping and is sentenced to 24 years in prison. Of course, police are very suspicious of Mike now, but it seems like they don't have anything to formally charge him or even declare him a suspect in Leigh's case. November 9th, 1993, a soybean farmer in Monroe County, Mississippi, was out working on his farm when he comes across what he believes to be a human skull. A coroner in Monroe County, Mississippi, reported that he positively confirmed the remains to be Leigh Occhi using dental records. The dental records had come from the skull, which was found in the soybean field by the farmer in the ditch. Within a few days, police announced that they had found the rest of Leigh's body around the same area. This farm is about 20 miles away from Leigh's home. But several days later, the coroner redacts his identification. Police announced that they need to do additional testing and that they are no longer positive that this is Leigh Occhi's remains. I don't know, maybe they thought it was her dental records. They found the rest of the body and then there was something that didn't add up.
Yeah,
I
but
will say,
how is that even possible?
I don't know. Apparently there was quite a few teeth missing from the skull, so maybe they didn't get like a full analysis of it and announced it before they were completely positive.
That's very weird. I find that odd, but even if they did, they like announced it. So it's obviously a child's jaw with teeth, like you can't really mistake that. But for them to announce that and then redact it is mind blowing.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems very unprofessional, but especially since they publicly announced it. So the family and the friends of Leigh believed that to be her for a short period of time, but I can't imagine. The announcement said that the state medical examiner would need to perform more forensic testing on the skull, and subsequently, it was confirmed that the skull belonged to 27-year-old Pollyanna Sue Keith, a woman who had gone missing in March 1993.
There's a big difference between a 13-year-old and a 20-something-year-old.
Yeah, 27.
1000%.
And I don't know anything about that case. I'm not sure how she went missing or why or anything about that. So, question mark. Leigh's case begins to grow cold once again. Mike Kearns would get out of prison in 1997. And he would only make it 2 years in the real world because in 1999 he would be convicted of another abduction and rape. In 2014, police and the FBI develop a DNA profile for Leigh and they enter her into CODIS as a missing person. In 2015, cadaver dogs would search a drainage ditch near Leigh's house, which would have been under construction after Hurricane Andrew, but nothing was discovered. In 2004, so pretty recently, Leigh's parents petitioned the court to have her legally pronounced dead, and a judge agreed. State law says that if a person has not been heard from for 7 successive years, the person shall be presumed legally dead. The implications of that are they can then investigate her case differently than they would a missing person. They can investigate her case as a homicide. In January 2025, the Mississippi Bureau of Investigation's Cold Case Unit, the Tupelo Police Department, and the FBI together conducted a search near the Occhi home. Police were seen digging close to the drainage ditch that runs by the cul-de-sac beside Leigh's home. But all the departments kept their findings, if any, close to the belt. The FBI stated that while findings from the search cannot be disclosed at this time, investigators remain committed to following all leads and gathering information related to the case. Leigh Marie Occhi is listed as a missing person with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. There is an age progressed picture on their website, which you can look at by going to missingkids.org. Leigh would now be 46 years old, and she's been missing since August 27th, 1992, when she vanished from her home. Foul play is suspected. More than 3 decades later, Leigh Occhi's disappearance still sits in the gray space. Someone knows what happened to her inside of that house on the morning of August 27th, 1992, whether it was an accident, an act of rage, or something planned. What police can tell us, though, was there was foul play. Leigh never got to grow up and never got justice. And until the truth comes out, this case remains unfinished. Her case is still a big question mark, so if you know anything, report it, obviously, and we will jump into overtime. Okay, so listeners, if you cut peppers, put gloves on.
This is Holly's lesson of the day.
I almost didn't get to do this story because my fingers burned. And that sounds so wimpy, but my fingers have been burning ever since I cut these peppers, these stupid peppers I was cooking. They're poblano peppers. I chopped up 2 of them into diced them up. Y'all, my fingers have been on fire for 2 days. I've been sleeping with ice packs on my hands. I was supposed to finish this story a couple nights ago, and I was could not type. I could not type for more than 5 seconds because my fingers would burn. And actually, right now, under my nails still burns. I'm just saying. Honestly, it needs to be talked about more.
The Holly curse continues.
Yes. Very strange things happen to me. Very strange things are going on in this brain.
I'm gonna send you some gloves.
Yeah, I know. I bought some on Amazon, and they'll be here in a day. I'm not cooking anything else that has peppers in it until I put gloves on my hands. So listeners, before this, we had a board meeting and we have a lot of exciting new stuff this year. So be on the lookout for that. Of course, we planned our 2026 Crime Con. So we are so excited about that. And we are looking so forward to it. This year it's going to be in Vegas. Whoop, whoop. And we are planning to go to Din Tai Fung. That's 25% of the trip for me is Din Tai Fung. I don't know if it's on everybody else's TikTok, but it's constant on mine.
Holly, I'm fully prepared to go to Din Tai Fung every single night with you.
It better be worth the hype.
I'm also scared to go, and I love it so much. I don't have any near me. You know what I mean?
Same. I have not one close, but I can't. I have to do it. I have no choice.
I am one of those people, like probably most of our followers, that have no idea what you guys are talking about. But if it's Asian food, count me in. Melee too, right? So yes.
Yes.
Basically, it's just a restaurant and it's blowing up on TikTok right now. They have quite a few locations. It's not even a factor, but it's just I want it so bad. And that is that. But yeah, we have a lot of other really cool stuff coming to the podcast that we think that you listeners will like. And as always, we appreciate all of your support. And if you like us, send us to your friends, subscribe, follow us. It really helps us out if you subscribe, and it costs you nothing. And we would love to have you subscribed. So anyways, yeah, there's that. And we will catch you next week with another case. Bye.
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 Bye.